It didn't arrive like they expected. No flashing lights in the sky. No gold discs spinning through the void. No patterns that looked like math or music or anything a human could make sense of. It came as a pulse, deep in the low-frequency radio band, buried beneath cosmic background radiation. A hiccup in the static. Something the universe had no reason to whisper. Until it did. And someone heard it. Dr. Kieran Avasarala had been working the overnight shift at the Atacama SETI array in Chile, killing time between dead frequencies, staring at screens that never blinked. She almost missed it. Just a flicker in the logs. A sequence that shouldn't have aligned. But it did. Not once. 3 times. Repetition, precision, delay. A message. Kieran sat forward, hands hovering above the controls. The signal was coming from Gliese 667cc, a red dwarf star system 23 light-years away. Known for having a potentially habitable planet, but otherwise cold. Silent. Dead. Not anymore. She hit record. And that's when the second part came through. A burst of sound, compressed, warped, but unmistakably constructed. It wasn't noise. It wasn't random. It was a voice. Except it wasn't speaking any language on Earth. Yet somehow, every researcher who listened claimed they understood the same meaning. You are not alone. You never were. And you will not remain. That was the night SETI stopped being a question and started being a threat detection unit. The global response was silence. Not disbelief. Not excitement. Just fear. The signal hadn't repeated. No more pulses. No visual confirmation. No ships in the sky. Just that one cold sentence. And then something stranger happened. People around the world, unconnected, unknown to each other, began having the same dream. A tall, dark room. A figure with no face. And a spiral on the floor that spoke when they stood on it. In every dream, the voice whispered, "They're already here." Governments scrambled. Psych teams were brought in. But the data showed a pattern. Every person who had the dream lived within 8 kilometers of a specific geological fault line. And that's when the real fear started. Because someone realized the signal might not have arrived from space. It may have activated something that was already here. At Langley, the CIA flagged an internal archive. Project ASHLINE, Cold War Relic, long abandoned. It detailed anomalous magnetic field readings collected from deep Earth probes during the 1960s. Areas where gravity dipped, time dilated, readings that reversed themselves when left unobserved. The conclusion? Unknown subterranean systems. Not tunnels, not caves, just something else. Something massive, dormant, buried beneath the plates like roots. And now, waking up. Kieran didn't know any of that when she returned to the lab 3 days later. She just wanted to hear the voice again. She'd tried to forget it, tried to sleep, tried to scrub it from her head like bad code. But it wasn't leaving. It kept humming in her blood. Not like memory, like instruction. She rerouted the dish. Away from Gliese. Toward Earth. She tuned it to the same frequency. Waited. And then the signal came back. Not from space. From the Pacific Ocean. Somewhere near the Mariana Trench. It wasn't just still active. It was broadcasting. The message this time was longer. Disjointed. Almost fragmented. But still human comprehensible. You inherited this world. You thought it was yours. It isn't. It was seeded, monitored, and now harvested. Kieran stopped breathing. The lab went silent. The radio crackled again. A final sentence. Soft. Almost regretful. We are not invaders. We are caretakers. And the lease is up. She tried to call for backup. But her phone wasn't her phone. Same model. Same wallpaper. But the contacts were gone. The apps didn't load. And in the place of her usual home screen, a single icon. A spiral. She tapped it. And the screen displayed a line of text. Transmission received. Identity updated. And then a map of Earth, but not political borders, biological zones, as if the planet was being scanned for viability. She didn't recognize most of the markers. except one. It was blinking red, right on top of her lab. That night, Kieran tried to warn her colleagues, but no one listened. Not really, because half of them had already changed. Subtle at first, different phrases, eyes that didn't quite reflect the same way, speech patterns slightly out of sync. And when she left the room, she could still hear them talking, in her voice, as if something had already copied her and was editing her place in reality. At 2:14 a.m., a second global broadcast occurred. But this time, it didn't come from SETI. It came from every device connected to the internet. Smartphones, televisions, cars, refrigerators. Each one showed the same image, a spiral, and a sentence. The countdown has begun. No one knows what the countdown leads to, but Kieran does. Because the spiral isn't just a symbol, it's a schedule. And the last segment is marked tomorrow. Not with a number, but a word. Harvest. Kieran didn't sleep that night. Not because of fear, but because the voice wouldn't let her. It didn't speak in words anymore. Not directly. It hummed, a vibration behind her ears, like pressure in a descending airplane. Except it never eased. When she closed her eyes, she didn't dream. She remembered images she'd never seen before, people she'd never met, landscapes that didn't exist on any map. But one thing was always the same. The spiral, carved into stone, etched into skin, burned into the soil. She saw cities of glass floating in oceans of ash, and towers built of bones spiraling into the sky. She saw people, humans, but not like us. Their eyes were filled with starlight. Their mouths moved in perfect silence, and their hands reached out, not to welcome but to replace. She woke up screaming, but the scream wasn't hers. It came from her phone. The lab was different the next morning. Not visibly. No lights flickering. No broken equipment. But the air was wrong. The other researchers smiled too long, paused in their work like they were listening to something just behind their thoughts. They nodded in unison when spoken to, and when Kieran tried to bring up the signal, no one remembered it, or claimed not to. "You're probably just tired," they said. "Too much data. Too little sleep." But their eyes kept drifting back to the hallway mirror, as if checking for something, for someone. Outside, the world was changing. News stations didn't report the spiral. They just played music, ambient tones, hour after hour. No anchors, no commentary, just soft, pulsing chords that seemed to sync with Kieran's heartbeat. Social media stopped being social. Accounts began reposting the same image, a handprint inside a spiral, and a caption, "Remember who came first." Kieran tried to run a trace. All the posts led back to accounts that didn't exist. No creation date, no user metadata, just content, pure message. And every upload had the same embedded timestamp. Tomorrow, 12 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. Harvest. She contacted her sister in Colorado, or tried to. The call went through, but it wasn't her sister who answered. The voice was slow. Wrong. It spoke in her sister's tone but said words that didn't fit. "We're all ready now. We've been waiting so long." Kieran hung up, but the line stayed open. And from the earpiece came a sound she'd never forget. The same pulse she heard on the first night, but now was layered, thicker, deeper, like multiple voices singing through static. And just beneath that, breathing, not one set of lungs, hundreds. At the university across town, a professor collapsed mid-lecture. Witnesses said he clutched his chest, then stood up again, smiling, and finished the lecture in a language no one recognized. When the police arrived, he was gone. The security footage showed him walking into a wall and disappearing. No impact, no break, just gone. But in the next frame, his reflection was still visible in the glass case across the hall, standing perfectly still, mouth moving, but no sound. Kieran drove to the old array herself that night. The main satellite uplink had been shut down by federal order, but she had access to the raw feed. She hooked in a portable receiver. tuned it to the original signal frequency, and listened, not just to the pulses, to the patterns, because this time they weren't just warnings. They were coordinates, lined up like veins across the planet. Deep sea trenches, volcanic tubes, collapsed caves in Siberia, and one location buried in the Arctic Circle. Latitude, 82.4067. Longitude, -40.6686. Status, active. It was then she understood. The signal hadn't been a message. It was a reconnection, a system reboot, a command to devices and people that were already waiting. Some of them disguised as humans. Some of them hidden deep inside us. Biological switches flipped on by radio keys no human ear could hear. You are not alone. You never were. And you will not remain. That wasn't a threat. It was a schedule. Back in a lab, the spiral appeared again. This time, projected on the walls. No source. Just light curling in from nowhere. And beneath it, a voice, Kieran's own, spoke. Phase 2 begins when you stop resisting. She turned. Everyone was gone, except for one researcher. Eyes glowing faintly blue. Mouth open, repeating her name over and over, as if trying to remember it, or steal it. They didn't just hear the signal anymore. They remembered it, as if it had always been there. Kieran woke up to find her notes rewritten. Not scratched out. Rewritten. The handwriting was hers, but tighter, more deliberate. Her loops were gone. The angles were sharp, surgical. Words she had never studied lined the pages. Precursor syntax, echo phonemes, chronosemispheres. At the top of one page. We did not translate the signal. The signal translated us. She backed away from the desk. Her computer flickered on without touch. No password prompt, just a black screen. And a cursor blinking. Then a line appeared, one letter at a time. Kieran, it's safe now. She unplugged it. The cursor kept blinking. The world outside wasn't breaking. It was reordering. Billboards changed overnight. Slogans shifted. Stronger together became closer now. Fast food wrappers bore spiral logos. Street signs began including strange glyphs alongside English. No one noticed, except her. She asked a barista about the logo on the coffee cup. The woman blinked, then smiled. It's always been there. Except it hadn't. Kieran had proof. Photos from last week. Posts. Videos. But when she scrolled back through her own social feed, every image had changed. Every timestamp had reset. As if the past itself was being updated, aligned. The Arctic coordinates haunted her. She tracked down an old satellite recon specialist, Dr. Lars Heikkinen, now living in self-imposed exile in Norway. She showed him the signal logs. He didn't blink. He just walked to a steel cabinet and unlocked a drawer marked NON Civilian. Inside was a reel of microfilm. From 1974. Infrared footage from the same Arctic sector. It showed a dome, geodesic, crystalline, rising from the snow over a 24-hour window, then vanishing without trace. It wasn't built, Lars whispered. It was returned, as if it had already been here. That night, Kieran slept barely an hour. When she awoke, her window was covered in condensation. No rain, no humidity, but a spiral traced in the glass, drawn from the inside. She ran. At the observatory, alarms were going off, but not for danger. For alignment, the system had received another signal burst, this time not just radio. It was optical. Across every major telescope in the world, pointed in different directions, the same star formation appeared. But the stars weren't stars. They were dots, burning blue nodes forming the outline of a handprint, a galactic fingerprint, touching glass. Then something blinked, and for 0.24 seconds, every telescope caught the same impossible image. Earth. But not this Earth. Ours. In ruins. Frozen. Cracked. And covered in the spiral. When the footage was reviewed, it was gone. Replaced with static. But the astronomers? They remembered it. Every one of them. Kieran received an email with no sender. Subject line: "You are not being invaded. You are being remembered." Inside, a photo of her as a child, standing on the beach. Except she had no memory of that moment. And the beach? The sand was black. The waves curled inward. The sun hung too low. Behind her stood a shape, 7 feet tall, human-like, but wrong. Fingers too long, eyes glowing faintly blue. She checked the metadata. Taken in 1994. She was born in 1991. The photo timestamp said 2025. Next year. The next power grid collapse wasn't an accident. Substations reported perfect voltage. But entire cities went dark for exactly 7 minutes. And when the lights came back, some things were different. Buildings were in the wrong place. Street names had changed. Old memorials were missing. And people started asking questions like, didn't this park used to have a fountain? Wasn't there a tower over there? Didn't my father die in a car crash? But their family photos now showed something else. A different story, as if the past was correcting itself. Back at the lab, Kieran finally decoded the last layer of the signal. Not data, not code, but emotion. It wasn't a message sent to Earth. It was a summoning not to warn, but to trigger recognition in something already inside us. A dormant genetic echo, a command not for machines, but for memory. That's why the spiral spread so easily. It didn't convince us. It reminded us of a past buried in extinction-level events, of ancestors not just from Earth, but from somewhere else. We weren't being invaded. We were being reactivated. The end wasn't an arrival. It was a return. The next day, Kieran saw her own reflection wave at her before she moved. And smile. Kieran stood on the rooftop of the observatory, watching the sky spiral in on itself. Not metaphorically. Literally. The stars were wrong now. Constellations she grew up with, Orion, Cassiopeia, the Big Dipper, had bent ever so slightly, realigned into a shape she recognized only from the signal. The spiral. Not drawn across the sky. Etched into it. As if space itself had remembered something we weren't supposed to forget. Below her, the world had stopped pretending. News outlets no longer denied the anomalies. They played them on repeat. Mass disappearances. Reflections that didn't match the person in the mirror. Echoes of screams from behind unplugged radios. Children drawing pictures of cities they had never seen and couldn't possibly have known. All of them spirals. All of them captioned the same way. It's waking up, but no one could agree on what it was. A god? A parasite? A memory? Or something worse, a truth that had never left. Just waited. The final signal didn't arrive in waves. It unfolded. Every screen on Earth turned black for 42 seconds. Phones, billboards, watches, fridge panels, airplane cockpits, even medical equipment, flat lines. And then one image of Earth, but not Earth as it was, Earth as it had been. A garden planet, lush, vast, empty of structures, except for one thing. At the top of every mountain, at the bottom of every trench, built into every coastline and canyon, were statues, pillars, obelisks, each one etched with the spiral. Not built by us, but for us, waiting for the memory to return. Kieran was one of the last to hold on. The Polaris team was gone. Not dead, just shifted. She found a recording from the lab's final day. Security footage. One by one, researchers turned toward the same hallway as if hearing something distant, and walked into nowhere. Not in panic, but in recognition, as if they'd simply remembered the way home, and followed. Kieran's phone rang at exactly 2:17 a.m. No number, no ringtone, just a voice on the line. Her own. It's okay. You're almost there. Then silence. And one message left behind. The spiral isn't a warning. It's a map of the way back. The next day, Kieran stepped into Times Square. Nobody moved. Thousands of people, frozen mid-step, staring at a massive screen as a final transmission played across it. A child, sitting in a white room, humming. Behind her, shadows moved, tall, slow, patient. She looked into the camera and said, "We remember you." Then the feed ended, and the people began to walk again, as if nothing happened. Kieran knew she had one chance left. She returned to the Arctic, back to the coordinates. The snow was gone, melted as if by heat from below, and in its place, the spire. Not a machine, not a transmitter, a key, made of material not known to Earth, pulsing with low blue light. At its base, an opening, a stairwell spiraling downward. She descended, and at the bottom, found a room carved from dark glass, walls etched in patterns that pulsed as she neared them, and in the center, her own face, projected in the air. But not her now, her from another life, hair different, eyes older, a scar she didn't remember, and a voice. "You made it. You're ready. Now remember who you were." And the walls began to hum. Not sound, but recognition. A name she hadn't known. A language she had never spoken. A world she had never seen. But it felt like home. She stepped into the center of the room and vanished. The last message from Earth satellites came 72 hours later. A deep space burst. Not binary, not Morse. Just one final phrase, repeated across the stars. "We were never alone." And then silence. But somewhere beyond the veil of signal, behind the skin of sky itself, a spiral turned, smiling. Because Earth was never the destination. It was the door. And it had finally been opened.